Hi friend, this is Alex McRobbs, founder of the Mindful Life Practice, and you're listening to the Sober Yoga Girl podcast. I'm a Canadian who moved across the world to the Middle East at age 23 and I never went back. I got sober in 2019 and I now live full-time in Bali, Indonesia. I've made it my mission to help other women around the world stop drinking, start yoga, and change their lives through my online Sober Girls Yoga community. You're not alone, and a sober life can be fun and fulfilling. Let me show you how. Hi everyone, welcome back to Sober Yoga Girl podcast. I'm your host, Alex McRobbs, and we have a special guest here today in Bali, my friend Mary Tilson. So welcome, Mary. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's so nice to be in your new studio. It's beautiful here.
Yeah, and you're my first guest that I've had in this new setup, and so that's really exciting. So
thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And so Mary and I first met in December. I had actually just moved to Bali, and it was really special because at that time I felt like I hadn't made a lot of connections here and hadn't made a lot of friends. And I was running some sober yoga, or what, they weren't sober, they were just general yoga classes at a retreat center that I was living in at the time. And Mary came up for a class and we had lunch, and I got to hear about her amazing journey and her story. And so she's actually created her own sober community online, Sun and Moon Sober Living, but she's also done incredible things in her sober journey. She's also a yoga teacher, led retreats, was full-time traveling around being a resident yoga teacher before the pandemic. And so anyway, we'll get more into it as the podcast episode goes on, but I'm just super happy to have you here. So
me too. Thank you. It's really nice to be here. And yeah, that was such a special time. Like the way that our paths have collided in Bali and just learning about our shared interests and being able to take your class was really special.
Yeah, it's been awesome. So thank you.
Thank you.
So tell me a bit about first of all, where are you from? How did you end up in Bali? And just give the audience a bit of context into you.
Sure. So I'm originally from Chicago. And so before getting sober, I was working at a digital advertising agency in Chicago. And that whole experience, it was a very work hard, play hard industry. I was drinking a ton when I was in the city. And so, I can go more into my sober story, but, at the time that I got sober, it was pretty clear that I needed to make a big life transition. And so, soon after I got sober, I did my first 200-hour yoga teacher training because I just wanted to pour my energy into something that was going to be positive and contribute to this recovery journey that I was on. And I was honestly feeling a little bit scared to be in Chicago, which was a city that I knew in terms of drinking through the weekends and partying in bars and having that whole social life. So I did my first 200-hour teacher training, and soon after that, a friend of mine came to visit, and she said, I'm quitting my job. We had gone to school together at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and she said, I'm quitting my job, and I'm going to go to Thailand. I'm going to go to Southeast Asia and travel. And it's funny looking back, I literally could not have pinpointed Thailand on a map at that time. Southeast Asia is like the love of my life and my home now for so many years. But I just had this instinctual knowing, like I was like, I'm coming with you. And it seemed like the craziest thing at the time because I had never done any sort of solo travel. I'd never been to Asia, but I was newly sober. I was in this yoga teacher training journey, feeling so much like clarity and connection to myself for the first time. And so I was also shocked because she was the friend that really had it together right out of school and was like, had the great job. And, she was really like on this career path that was promising a lot of security. And so there was just all these things coming together where I thought, you know what, if she can do that, I can too. So I ended up leaving my job in digital advertising, thinking I was going to take a 3-month sabbatical. I had all of my resume and my cover letters and all my contacts saved so I could start sending the emails out after those 3 months and get my next job when I came back to Chicago. But that set me on a journey to Southeast Asia, and It was one of those things where, you know, we got out there, 2 other friends ended up joining us. So there were 4 of us. We got out there and we were on this backpacking trip that was just about connecting to nature, hiking, having these cultural experiences. You know, while some people go to Thailand and they're like partying, doing the full moon party, staying up all night, drinking, you know, 50-cent beers or whatever it is, we were like really on this journey of trying to learn about the culture and do, all of these. We'd have so many beautiful sunrises, and it was just such a powerful, transformative experience for me. And I ended up at a yoga and meditation retreat center in Cambodia, which absolutely changed my life. It's just thinking about it it was you'd arrive there and it was so simple, so connected to nature. You'd lock your phone away the moment you got there. We were living in these grass bamboo huts in the jungle in this traditional farming village, walking barefoot, practicing yoga, doing Dharma talks, really engaging in conversation, fully present together in community. And I just felt so at home in that space. And I actually had the opportunity to teach a class there, which was a really big moment. And I never had the intention of teaching yoga full time because it wasn't sustainable when I was in Chicago. You know, you probably know what it's like being from.
It's so hard.
Yeah, you'd have to run around and hustle, and it just didn't feel like something I was going to be able to do. But I started to realize for the first time, like in this environment, this is so transformative. We are not only practicing yoga on the mat, but really embodying the teachings and the philosophy of yoga, which I know is so important to you too, and what you share with your practice. But all of a sudden, like things started to shift in my mind, and I started to see this possibility of living a totally different life. And I was so in love with this lifestyle of being outside and being in nature. So I was just lit up. Like I taught this class and I had, it was an amazing experience, my first retreat when I was there in Cambodia. And I had travel planned after that. So I stayed in touch with them and, had a really great relationship with the people that were working there. And I went on and I continued traveling after that. I extended my trip from 3 months to 6. It's laughable now because it hasn't ended. It's been like the 8-year sabbatical that goes on forever.
That's incredible.
But so after that, I got a call when I was still traveling. I was actually at the yoga barn in Ubud when I got a call from the manager there at the time. And he said, we have an opportunity for a teacher to come for 3 months and be the resident yoga teacher at the retreat center. And it was another one of those moments where I always struggled with indecision and not really knowing what to do and wanting everyone to tell me and get their opinions. But I just knew, it was such a strong knowing. I remember landing in Cambodia when I was going back and I had made that commitment. And some of my friends that were at the retreat center as guests were like, are you really going to live there for 3 months? Because there's no stimulants, not even coffee. It's strictly vegan, phones locked away. And I was like, yeah, I love this. I was, when you're newly certified with, and you're new on this path to yoga, it's yes, give me all of it. So I went back there and 3 months turned into a year. Stayed there, led 40 retreats as the resident yoga instructor there. And after that, I just knew that I wanted to continue on hosting retreats. So that kind of gave birth. I'm so grateful for Joel, who's the founder of that center. And he's been a very influential teacher, especially for meditation and yoga philosophy. But that really gave birth to the idea of hosting my own retreats. And so just kind of one thing led to another. Yeah. So it's just, I think that experience of traveling and being there just really opened up my mind to what's possible. And I think that's really the gift of retreats. You sit down and you get to be in this community of people from all walks of life. And what was also really great for me at the time was I was meeting people in various stages of life that were maybe in their 40s or 50s and still going through these big transitions of life, I've decided that my job as a lawyer is no longer serving me. So I'm ready to step into something new. And I was like, this is so different than what I had been surrounded by leading up to that point, where it was, you know, so much more of like following the traditional path. Like you pick your major, you graduate from university, you go into your career, and then you just keep building in that career. So yeah, that was really a pivotal time in my life. And then, you know, since then, opportunities just kind of gradually came one after the other. I ended up doing a lot of training after that. Like I would intersperse being a resident teacher with going to India or doing some trainings. Like I trained with Shiva Ray.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So it's really just been like kind of just following this path as it evolves naturally, really.
Wow. And how old were you when you went through all this, like the sobriety and then getting the opportunity to go traveling, and like what age were you?
So I was 23.
Wow.
I think.
Oh
Yeah. So super young.
So young. So young to just be like, well, it was the same age that I moved abroad, but I was still in this very rigid mindset of like, I need a job, I need a salary, I need medical, you know? And so I just think that's amazing that you're 23 and you're like, I'm just going to follow this dream and see where it leads me, you know?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Well, thank you. I mean, when I look back at it, like people would say to me, they would message me when I was traveling and be like, that's so brave. Like and I knew also that, like, to be completely honest, I was so scared. Yes, to me, it was really scary being in Chicago and being sober. Like I had built this identity since the time I was really like before high school of being someone that like loved to party and loved to like kind of push the boundaries and just like chasing excitement. And that really carried into the career that I built in advertising too, because we were going out all the time. I was on this board where I organized social events. Like it was crazy. I was in outpatient rehab when I first got sober, and I was going nights and weekends when I was working at the advertising agency. And I was on this board called Future Digital Leaders that was in charge of like organizing social events, among other things. And so I had organized this bar crawl where everybody gets a passport and you go around to like different themed bars. So one, for example, is Paris Club. So it was like all French themed and you get like your passport stamp. So I'm like, okay, I still need to go and be at this event that I organized. And I'm literally in rehab. Like nobody knows, but I'm going from like always being in these, like being like the drunk one or the one who's kind of trying to rally people. So I was just like, I compare that time to feeling like an open wound, because I was like, who am I? You know, and do I even want to be, like at first it was like, how am I going to be in these situations, these like business networking situations sober, because like it's challenging to like navigate these situations. But then the question was like, am I only like, how much of this is based on the fact that I can drink at work?
Yeah.
Or like as such a big part of my job. So I had to ask a lot of questions of like, why am I even in Chicago? Like, why am I in this industry? And so, yeah, with being like, interestingly, being in Southeast Asia, it was such a safe space to be in, because the actual, like the places that I was visiting, you know, when we were going through like Thailand and Cambodia and Vietnam and Laos, have these beautiful, like drinking is not part of the culture the way that it is. Like, yes, tourists, unfortunately, tourists bring it in a way that is shocking. Like I remember being in Thailand and I'd be waking up early to go to yoga, and you'd see people like crawling out of the jungle. Like, yeah. And I would have
when
been
I
too.
went to Thailand, that's what exactly it was like.
Well, I was like, thank God I came now, and like not when I was drinking, but yeah, like in general, I felt like I was in such a safe container to just rediscover who I was when I was newly sober, because I didn't have to pass on alcohol. Like, even though the friends that I was traveling with weren't necessarily sober, but they weren't suggesting that we go out partying. Like we were all just kind of on this journey of learning about spirituality and like just discovering this part of the world.
It's so beautiful. Mm-hmm. You know, your that journey of you know, being the person that organized these events at your workplace and then being the person that was getting sober and had to attend them. That reminds me a lot of myself in that the year that I quit drinking, I was on the social committee. And about 3 months before I quit drinking, it was the Christmas parties. I quit drinking in April, so maybe 3-4 months. I was literally the person at the door serving these like sparkly green and red Christmas drinks. It was like gin and vodka things. And I got so drunk because I was handing them out to people, but you're like nervous and you're whatever. And so you're drinking yourself.
Yes.
And then by like, half an hour into the night, I hadn't eaten anything, but I had drank so much and had not even kept track of how much I had drank. And I always think back to that time because I quit drinking and then I was the social committee girl and I still had to play that role. And it's like all of a sudden you want nothing to do with these events that used to be your thing and then trying to find the kind of find peace with that.
Yeah. And it's sad looking back on that because I think both of us, obviously we've gravitated now towards like retreats and different things that it's sad that we associate so strongly social life and social events with drinking.
100%.
Because that's the thing, like I think about Chicago and, I even know people who I've been in touch with who are still living there who have reached out to me asking about, advice about how to navigate their life there. But unfortunately, everything was a drinking event. It was like, you can't just go to art class. It's like bottles and Bottega or, everything you do has to have drinking involved. So I think, it's sad because I thought, okay, by the time that I got sober, I actually already had been to outpatient rehab once 3 years before, but I was not ready in any way I didn't know until I got into rehab that you have to go cold turkey. So I just thought like, okay, like help me like get rid of all of this like shame and guilt and learn to moderate and everything. So I was familiar with what was going to be involved with like going completely cold turkey. And but when I did make that choice, when it got so bad 3 years later that I went back to outpatient rehab, my thinking was like, all right, I'll give up alcohol and I'll just be alone a lot of the time. Like that was what I thought. I was like, I'll just give up like my social life and it'll be worth it because the pain has gotten so bad from the addiction. And it's sad because I think that a lot of people would actually give up alcohol and drugs a lot easier if they didn't feel like they were going to be completely disconnected from other people, because they're like, as humans, we have an instinctual need, like that sense of belonging is really important to our overall health and well-being. So that's something that I feel like we really need to, and you're obviously doing such an amazing job of that, but remind people that you can actually have a social life, an amazing social life, and be part of, like, feel that sense of connection and community. And actually it can be so much richer when you're sober. Like that was something that I was so afraid of, how my friendships would be impacted and losing friends or just being boring or whatever it was. And for sure, like some people kind of like slipped away, like the people that I was doing drugs with till 5 a.m. at sunrise, or the people that you find yourself in those like final moments before you get sober, like those relationships were very quick to just dissolve. And they were really built on that anyway. Yeah. But it was also, I really saw who my true friends were. Like my best friend who ended up coming out to Asia, but, we were living together, like just completely changed a lot of like, she would be like also waking up early on Saturday morning and going to bed early the night before, and was practicing as I was doing my teacher training, would come home from work and do like vinyasa yoga in the living room at 9 p.m. so I could get the hours in. So it's like, it also becomes this, it really brings a lot of depth into the relationship that matters.
Yeah, that's so true. What do you think, you mentioned like that alcohol is such a big part of our social life. What do you think it's that connection, desire to be connected?
I do, yeah. I think there's a lot of things. I had a really interesting conversation with an Ayurvedic practitioner who was talking about our resistance to discomfort. And I think that is so important to acknowledge. That was a really big part of my experience at Hariharalaya, the yoga and meditation retreat center I lived at. Like Joel would often point to the fact that we are so resistant to any discomfort because we have so much like instant gratification and so much relief. Like it's like you're hot, turn the air conditioning on, you're hungry, Uber Eats, like literally anything you want, or Gojek if you're in Bali.
Yeah.
And so I think that we have sort of been conditioned to feel like it's not okay to like feel that anxious feeling after work. And, you know, I think part of it is seeking a relief from discomfort because that's like, you know, being in the States, it's like you can so easily numb out. It's just like pick your poison, you know, whether it's like online shopping, Netflix, social media, like food, like whatever it's going to be. So I think that is a big part of it. And then, yeah, of course, social connection, because we really have allowed alcohol to penetrate every social setting imaginable, you know? Like I can think of, I actually saw, you know, Facebook brings up those memories. Like I mentioned the bottles in Bottega, and there was a photo of me and I'm just like, my face is so red. My lips are like, I'm like holding my wine and like my painting. And I'm like, the only reason I was there was just like a different environment to drink in. Whereas like we just went and did that art class, like we did ceramics making in Bali, and it was just so fun in itself, you know, like there's no reason to have alcohol in every situation.
It's so true. And then also you can like connect deeper to like the activity you're doing and the people you're conversing with. Like I remember, I'm trying to think if I ever did, I'm sure I did like art classes, sipping wine, whatever. But like my focus would be on like, you know, ordering the next round of wine, waving down the waiter, getting the next drink, getting drunk. And so I wouldn't actually be present with like the creative experience or the social element of it. And so you're exactly right in that it's just another environment to drink in.
That is so true. Like I think I remember I knew that, and you might have this experience too, but it started to become really apparent that like my relationship with alcohol must be different than other people, because I'd be sitting at like a dinner, like we go to happy hour or something like that, and I would be like scanning the other glasses, getting so frustrated that people were drinking so slowly, because it would be such an apparent thing when the bill comes, like somebody has 4 glasses of wine and everyone else had 1, you know? And I would feel like a real anger and resentment towards them. And it even happened to my mom on a family vacation once. I remember like I had been day drinking and I had like suggested that we all get shots. And my mom was like, Mary, and I like went after her, like, and it like haunts me, that memory still, but it totally prevents you from being present when you have that relationship with alcohol. And like, only we know that, you know, only we can say for ourselves. But it was in my mind, I was convincing myself that it was, you know, a way that I was being social. But the reality was, it was like, there was a really unhealthy pattern going on in my mind every time I was around alcohol with people involved.
Yeah. So what did you mentioned earlier about alcohol kind of being a way to like numb out. And I'm wondering, once you got sober and you were like experiencing discomfort or experiencing, you know, challenging emotions, what did you do instead? What strategies did you use?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, like I said, like I feel like for a while, I felt so sensitive and so scared, like an open wound, really. And I really leaned into the community that I had. So I first started getting sober, you know, I went to outpatient rehab at Hazelton. So I was in group therapy, and part of that is going to AA meetings. And I also had my yoga teacher training group. And, you know, the interesting thing is I realized I was so wrapped in, I had so much shame that even in, like, I never shared in AA rooms. It took me a very long time to open up to my group in group therapy, even in like the group that I met with for hours and hours for that 6 weeks of treatment. So when I look back on that, I think about that a lot, because I know how beneficial that would have been. But for some reason, I was so resistant to that and so resistant to like one-on-one therapy. But I was definitely benefiting a lot from hearing stories, and that like slowly started to ease me into it. So, you know, being around community, listening to people's stories was huge for me. And I would read, you know, there wasn't as many books. Like, it's so amazing now. Like, there's a million Quitlet books. But I remember there was this memoir called Dry by Augustine Burroughs. Yeah. And
he works in marketing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I really, really like just connecting with people's stories in that way. And then when I was doing my yoga teacher training, we barely scratched the surface when it comes to yoga philosophy. I mean, you could spend a lifetime studying yoga philosophy, but I remember looking at like the 8 limbs, and I didn't even talk to my yoga teacher training group that I was in recovery, but internally I'm like, this is exactly like the 12 steps. Like, there's such a strong familiarity. And so both of those paths, which are really, there's so much overlap, but combining, the spiritual aspects and the cognitive aspects of the 12 steps with yoga and the embodiment practices, like, I am such a strong believer in the healing potential of our body. And so, like, practicing yoga every day was massive for me. Like, though so much was like being processed on the mat. So that was something that I always really encourage people to do. And I recognize that not everyone, a lot of people are like, oh, I've tried yoga and it's not for me. Do things to get inside of your body. Yeah. Like, that was huge for me because, what I started to realize is like, we experience life through our body, right? So, and it's basically like our body is like this storage house of impressions of all of our experiences. And when I was sitting in my office, in my cubicle, and just like had so much stress building up, and I had no way of tuning into my body and saying, you're stressed, you need rest, like, this is unhealthy, you need to eat a nourishing meal. Instead, it was like, I just need to take more Adderall, and then I need to go drink 2 bottles of wine when I get home and smoke a ton. And like, I had all of these things that was taking me outside of like tuning into my body. But as soon as all of that kind of went away and I was in these practices, and I could really check in with myself every day and start to notice what stress feels like when it's bubbling up. And, when you're sober and you're doing those practices every day, you have a lot more of like a subtle awareness to that. So it's not like the lid is going to like bust off by the time that you notice you're stressed. It's just you start to pick up on like, ooh, I'm a little off balance today. Like, maybe I need to move around my schedule a little bit. Maybe I need to find time to go out for a walk in nature. So and nature. So it was the community, it was yoga and meditation practices, and then being in nature, like recognizing that I was living in such artificial conditions, which is mind-blowing to think about now. But it was like from city apartment to the train to the high-rise building, sitting under artificial lighting in a plastic cubicle, staring at Excel spreadsheets all day. It's just like, what could take you further from nature and what's natural for us, to a natural environment for us?
It's so true. And it ties really into the theme of the Sober Yoga Girl podcast this month is all about the root chakra. And that's the first chakra along our 7 chakras along with spine. And it's really about like building your foundation. And one of my favorite visuals for it is like a tree and roots for a tree. And if we don't have these like solid roots, then the tree's not going to like survive or thrive. Survive. Just made that up. But for myself, I was living in like that total artificial world. And it's not that, so I was living in Dubai and Abu Dhabi in the Middle East. And it's not that the Middle East doesn't have nature, because it has its own kind of nature, like, the desert and whatever, which is nature by definition. But we've created this artificial world within that nature. And so we all live in our little apartments and our little air-conditioned spaces. And I've been there for so long, and I was there for the entire pandemic. And every day, oh my God, when I just open these doors, like you can kind of see we're shooting in my house right now, but we have this like beautiful nature around me. And it's even just getting outside the door and feeling the wind and hearing the birds and just like breathing. I can just do one breath, like just one breath. and then get on the computer and start my Zoom call. And I like can't even describe what a difference that makes to have this access to being outside.
Yeah, it's so true. And, you know, when I think back on Chicago too, like I feel like it's important to acknowledge that like there is nature in the city.
Yes.
I mean, there are parks, there's the lake, and even for people who aren't fortunate enough to have nature around, like I remember this always sticks with me because Nikki would talk about like in grounding, Nikki Myers, who's one of my teachers, about like having literally a plant pot and just like sticking her fingers in the dirt just to like, so I was making a conscious choice or unconscious choice, but I was kind of just following what I saw as being totally normal to deprive myself of that because I didn't really know what the value of it was, you know? So I think that finding those moments really wherever you are, like whether it's having a plant in your city apartment, an animal, like I was just like going over in your apartment and having your cuddly cat to just like, you know, connect with for a minute.
Oh my God. The meditation of like having my cat's presence, like my cat on my belly. I adore it. First thing, I start off the day with my cat. That was game changing for me, actually, getting a cat. And I got her during the pandemic. And that becomes like a meditation in itself, you know?
Yes. So someone told me, I was talking about that because like how amazing it is for me, like having cat purrs on my chest. And apparently, I mean, someone will have to fact check this, but there's been some research about like the frequency of cat purrs that's been deeply healing for people, like almost like a sound meditation.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like taking time, because I think before I didn't have time for anything. It was like all about like, because I would have never had a pet in my apartment in Chicago because I mean, I don't have time for that. Like I want to get off of work. I want to be able to go out until like the very last minute until, you know, so it was just always like rush, filling every minute. But I feel like animals are such a nice way to just slow you down and get outside of yourself because it's like, no, the cat needs to be fed, you know, and take time.
100%. And her reconnection to nature. I talked about this a few weeks ago when you came to my yoga class. But I was speaking about how my cat has lived her whole life in an Abu Dhabi apartment and never really experienced nature. And now her experience of it has been like the most beautiful thing. So she loves to just be by the pool and walk around, and like you'll see her in my yoga classes when the camera's like, you know, angled that way, people see her walking around outside. But even at nighttime, so I have this outdoor bathroom here. It's the most amazing thing in the world. The bathtub is surrounded by plants and the rain can come down on me when I'm in the bath. But I leave that door open now because her litter box is there. So she has access to the outside literally 24/7. And one of her favorite things to do is literally just get her paws muddy and just walk around in the plants by the bathtub.
Yes.
And I just think it's the cutest thing. And then she'll come back inside and get like the bed all muddy with her paws. And I just think it's so beautiful. And it just shows how like that's all of our natural state is, you know, with nature. And we have to feed that part of ourselves.
100%. Yeah, it's funny. I feel like sometimes I've heard multiple people say like, oh, I wouldn't have a pet because, you know, I live in a high-rise apartment and they wouldn't be able to go outside or whatever. And it's like, but you live in a high-rise apartment. You know, we're also animals. We also have those needs. So it's funny how we can think about something. We can put ourselves in these positions where we're totally disconnected for nature. But then I had that same experience in India. I remember like, you know, commenting like, oh my gosh, this is so sad. These cows are in the middle of a big city. Like, where's the grass? And I'm like, so are all the people, you know? It's just like, we are all animals. But I love that we're talking about the cat thing because I actually heard a funny story from my husband who was just on this trip. He was on a work trip and he said that he met a lot of people who were talking about having secret cats during the pandemic because there's like a stigma against being a cat lady. And so I was like, we need to collectively end the stigma. It's like first alcohol. And then I'm like, we need to end the stigma about cats.
Can you believe that? Was it Indonesian people or?
No, back in the States.
Really?
I thought that was so funny because there's like this thing about being a cat lady. And I was like, I am going to be a proud cat lady.
Yeah, 100%. That really shocks me. I'm so proud of my cat.
I know. I was so shocked by that too, but I was meaning to tell you that too, because I was like, we also need to end the stigma on being a cat lady. Because you know how everybody has that, like, the cat lady thing about like.
Totally. But they're amazing.
Exactly. I know, but it's just another example of how we have these like externalized views of how we should be and what we should be doing. And it prevents us from just connecting with things that are really instinctual.
So true. Oh, I'm a proud cat lady.
Me too.
So tell me about the work that you do now. I know you have amazing podcasts and starting Sun and Moon Sober Living, but where can people find you and what work do you do in the sober space?
So I just recently brought Sun and Moon to life. It was sort of, all this time while I was teaching yoga and leading retreats, I felt like I really had a responsibility and a desire to serve the sober community. And it was sort of like brewing inside me for a long time. And I was like, oh, but I don't have time to do all these things simultaneously. But I think there was just this opportunity when everything slowed down. And so Sun and Moon Sober Living, I just started an Instagram page, and I was like, I'm just going to start to share more openly about this so I can work against the stigma that we have against, make people feel more comfortable to share their stories and remember that they're not alone. People who might never end up in an AA meeting, or now there's so many other types of meetings. And I host online meetings. So every couple of weeks, I bring people together over Zoom so we can connect. And I start those off with a theme that we can work with and explore together. And there's usually some journaling and reflecting. I teach guided meditation. And it's optional how people want to participate or just listen. The goal for me really is just to create an inclusive space. And as it evolves pretty naturally, I just try to think about, like, when I look back at a past version of myself who was so riddled with shame and just was so afraid of like being seen in a meeting. Like, I even I was thinking about like showing up on Zoom is actually a huge step. Like, I was so terrified every time I walked into a meeting thinking, what if someone sees me, without ever realizing that they would also be there too. So it's okay. But yeah, so I wanted to create the idea is just to make it a very open, welcoming space. So whether you're in a place where it's useful for you to read something online or listen to a podcast episode or connect with other people, that's kind of what I'm building with Sun and Moon Sober Living. And
amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I feel like the name kind of communicates a lot, because the idea with Sun and Moon is to embrace all of it. There's the light and the dark, like recognizing that, yes, a lot of us arrive at the decision to get sober because there's been a real challenge. And as we were talking about earlier with discomfort, like being okay with being in the discomfort and, embracing that and learning tools to kind of move through that. And then also, there's the bright side of sober living. So I love the way that the whole recovery conversation has evolved. It could have just been like kind of my narrow perspective when I first got sober, because like 9 years ago, I feel like there wasn't really, now sobriety there's such a pull factor. Like, there's such a celebration, I feel like, of the health benefits and all of that. And I want to bring attention to that too, because when I first went into recovery, it was like, it was first moving through like a lot of pain and struggle, and there is going to be that. But I think there's also a reason for people to just choose a path of sobriety. Like, I know a lot of people in my life and in my close circle now that are just like, they're a little bit more aware of what the harmful side effects of alcohol are. And, they want to have their energy so they can do things like wake up and surf, or they've got passion projects that they want to bring to life. So yeah, it's really about embracing all of it.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. So incredible. And I keep seeing your things popping up. I think I commented on one of them recently. The trouble is that often the time when that's most common for like your events is also for mine. Like, I think I commented that I was like, I also have a sober meeting and a yoga class that day, but I would really love to come because I really enjoy getting out of my community and just experiencing how different people do different things and meeting new people, and also getting a chance to step into situations as not a leader, but just as a participant is really beautiful. So I definitely will join at some point when it works.
Yeah, we'll have to schedule. I mean, we're in this time zone where like late at night is like the moment you can hit like European time zone, the States. But yeah, I would love to have you because I've been so lucky to be able to come to, the community events that you've set up here in Bali, which was so amazing. I have to say, like you've been hosting these, like for people who don't know, these live events here in Bali. And I really wasn't sure. I'd been to an AA meeting years and years ago in Bali, and it was very small and intimate. And I wasn't really sure like how that was, how many people are around that are like, and it's such a full class and such a like diverse mix of people too and different stories. So yeah.
I posted on a Facebook group and there's like 40 people in a WhatsApp group right away, which is incredible. And so it shows that this is really the thing. We've had this conversation before about how you can make any city is what you make of it. And so there's some people that say like we both met someone who said like, Bali's too triggering for them because this is their party island. And I think both of us were like, what?
Yeah, the party island.
Really? And so it just kind of shows, you can find your sober pockets everywhere in the world, but there's something about Bali that seems to really attract people on a healing journey, which is really amazing.
Yeah, so absolutely.
We're very lucky to be here.
Definitely. Yeah, I think too, there's something about being in a more natural state.
Yeah.
And being in a natural environment. And that was something that was really interesting. I worked for a while on a remote island called Sumba, which is about an hour flight east of Bali. And you would just see, like, you could almost see like the physical manifestation. Like people would come straight off the plane. Well, it would be like a 36-hour journey by the time they got there from New York. And it was like just so wound up. And you could just like see it, you could see it in the way they carry themselves in their body and running around wanting to like plan the whole schedule, but just you can like that witnessing the sort of releasing of tension that's accumulated in your body and just slowing down in nature. I feel like it presents so much opportunity to like really look inward and have a clear perspective on the way you really feel and what nourishes you and makes you feel most alive and how you want to kind of move forward from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, this has been such an awesome conversation. Really fun to do it in person and connect. I have one more question for you, and that is, if you were to give some advice to your younger version of yourself, like just at the start of your sober journey, what advice would you give?
God, I was like thinking about, I was writing for my 9-year, like I was writing about my 9-year sober anniversary, and I was just thinking about myself in that moment, just so scared. Like I thought that I was going to lose everything, like friends, career, and just, I would just tell myself like the reason that you are so afraid is because this is so much bigger than you can imagine. Like I feel so emotional when I talk about it. Yeah, because I mean, I could have never imagined being in Southeast Asia. Like I could have never imagined the relationships that I would have been able to build. And it's, so like, I remember, I had gone to a yoga class I was newly sober, and it was funny because this is a brand new teacher, which is why I think it's really important for yoga teachers to understand like the potential impact you can have no matter how much experience you have. But I was at this really pivotal moment soon after I got sober. I was like 3 months in. I had tried to go to Lollapalooza, just had a horrible time because I was trying to go to this music festival sober. It was like the worst day of my life. And the next morning I went to a yoga class, and in my head I was like, I can't do this. Like I'm only like 23. This is going to be terrible. And this teacher read this story from the Book of Awakening by Mark Nepo, and it starts, every crack is an opening. And it sounds,
I don't know it, but it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's like, he basically, as she was reading this, I'm like lying at the end of the class thinking about how I can't do this. Like, I need to just go back to drinking. And he talks about, you know, the story of a chick being born. And from the view of a chick, it's this terrifying struggle. Like, its shell is caving in. It's like this dark, cramped, suffocating feeling. And the reality is, like, the chick isn't like dying. It's being born into the world. And it sounds like, it can sound really like cheesy when I think back on it, but it really did shift my mindset. And I just thought, you know what, just like maintain that belief. Like, there is something else. Like, you just haven't gotten there yet. And, you know, like all the sayings I was being told, just like one step at a time. But when I look back on that, it was so significant to me in the moment, but I was like, that was such a powerful metaphor. Like, that was the advice. That woman who was literally newly certified teacher gave me that advice, like exact. So I wouldn't have changed a thing. I would have said it to myself maybe a little bit earlier, but you know, that was the lesson. Like, it's just bigger than you can imagine. You know, I was just in a very narrow bubble. So yeah, that would be it.
That's so beautiful. Wow.
Sorry, I get like this. I was like, as I've been doing a lot of reflecting lately, and it just makes me like, I think about like, when I think back about like how I felt in those moments, like that's why like, I think for anyone who's in that place, it's like, you're not alone. It's just that we all keep it so quiet and, you know. So.
Yeah. Oh, that was beautiful. I was tearing up too with you, honestly, because it's just it's so inspiring and powerful to think that you're in this moment of like, what am I doing and what's next? And I can't do this. And then just to see what you've done, what you've accomplished in 9 years, like, it's just absolutely mind-blowing and so inspiring. And I bet there's so many people listening who, like, I know that was my dream, like, to come live in Southeast Asia, and now I'm here. But I bet there's so many people listening who are like, what is next? And the truth is that the possibilities are endless.
Right.
So
yeah, and same to you. Like, it's incredible that we've been able to connect and seeing the impact that you've had, like the amount of things that you're offering to support people in sobriety. It's such a testament to the amount of time and energy and like creative capacity we open up when when alcohol is removed from the picture, because
absolutely.
Yeah, I really admire everything that you're doing. And thank you for having me on this podcast.
Well, we'll definitely have to. We were chatting before we got set up about like doing retreats together or events. Definitely, if anyone's listening, comes down to Bali, I'm sure you'll meet Mary at some point. But thank you so much for everyone for tuning in. And I'm going to leave all of the links and everything for Mary's information in the podcast episode bio description in case you're interested in checking her out more. And I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Yes, you will.
Hi, friend. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Sober Yoga Girl podcast. This community wouldn't exist without you here, so thank you. It would be massively helpful if you could subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast so it can reach more people. If we haven't met yet in real life, please come get your 1-week free trial of the Sober Girls Yoga membership and see what we're all about. Sending you love and light wherever you are in the world.